Hey, what's up guys? As you probably know, I've been putting off with checking Elemental Shaman for a while, but last week they updated some things to it, which means that right now I'll be giving you some initial thoughts about Elemental Shaman in the Shadowlands Beta. One thing before we start, I've been playing Elemental pretty much since Warlords to Draenor on and off, depending on the raid tier, which means I'm not new to the spec in any way, but it is possible I might miss some things since I've been following enhancement mainly on the beta so far. So from my experience so far, it feels like there's still a fair amount of work to be done on Elemental Shaman. I played around with it on single target and AoE a bit, and it feels very unfinished right now. It seems like they had some ideas of what they wanted, but it feels like when they removed some of those ideas last week, there are still remnants of the previous system that have to be resolved. So at the start of the beta/alpha, there were two new resources instead of the Maelstrom that we had. You had Fulmination, which is what you generate with Lightning Bolts to then spend on Earthshock, and you deal more damage per charge of Fulmination. And then you also had Seismic Thunder, which you generated by casting Chain Lightning on AoE, and you can use these stacks to make Earthquake instant and make it do more damage. So the main problem with this was that Lava Burst and Frost Shock felt disconnected from the system. Frost Shock is if you have Ice Fury, otherwise you wouldn't really be casting Frost Shock. It felt disconnected from the whole system. It also made single target and AoE completely different with no real options for in-between or funneling, or at least not like any satisfying options. What they did recently to change this is that they removed Seismic Thunder and they moved it all to Fulmination. And while they did this, they also made it so Lava Burst also generates Fulmination stacks. So let me show you how we can generate these Fulmination stacks now. So if we do Lava Burst, I have a Fulmination bar here that you can see. So we have one stack, we have two stacks because our mastery made it overload. And if I do Lightning Bolt, also get a stack. If I do Chain Lightning, I'm not gonna get a stack because it's single target, but if I use it on AoE, let's drop the stacks real quick. I got two stacks here, got one stack, two stacks. So you can only use Chain Lightning on AoE to get Fulmination stacks basically. Now these Fulmination stacks that we got, we can use these on either Earthquake or Earthshock, but if you look at the damage numbers, Earthquake does 477, oh this is probably with some buffs, 465 damage over 6 seconds, and Earthshock does 282 damage. So Earthquake does more damage by default. And if we look at Fulmination, Fulmination increases the damage of both Earthshock and Earthquake, depending on how many stacks of Fulmination we have. So on single target, I'll show you, you pretty much at the moment want to use exclusively Earthquake because it is not worth to cast Earthshock. If we do one Earthquake here, that's unlike, okay, 204 damage. I do have some versatility, but 204 damage on non-crits. Let's see, I got one crit. If it was 6 times 204 about, let's say it was 1.2k damage. Now if we check Earthshock on 8 stacks, let's hope we don't crit, because Shaman has a bigger crit multiplier, and that would make it harder to compare. Okay, so if I now use Earthshock, 604, 280. So Fulmination counts as a separate damage instance, but in total this did 880 damage, which is less damage than Earthquake on single target. Which means that at the moment there is no reason to ever use Earthshock on single target. I'm sure they'll change this, but that's just what it is right now. So to recap real quick, the problem I have, and most likely quite a few other people, is that they moved away from Maelstrom completely, which in my opinion was fine, because before Maelstrom, Shaman was fine as well. But then they removed one of their new resources, which they used to go away from Maelstrom. And now Fulmination is pretty much Maelstrom, but in a worse version than what we had before. So in my opinion, I think that they still have a few other changes coming, because if they don't, besides balancing of course, because I'm sure they're gonna balance Earthquake to be weaker than Earthshock single target, but I really hope they have a few other changes coming to actually make it feel good, because right now it feels kind of weird to me. Now two other changes I want to quickly mention is that we got Spirit Walker's Grace back finally, let's see, here, where we can pretty much move and cast at the same time for 15 seconds. I never understood why they removed this, but I'm glad it's back. And now the other change is that they reduced our Flame Shock duration from, I think, 22 to 18 seconds, if I'm correct. Where is it? Yeah, it's 18 seconds now. They changed how fast it takes from every 2 seconds to every 3 seconds. So we're gonna get a lot less lava burst charges. I think they might be doing this because they want lava burst to feel more impactful and powerful than what it was before. Because if you get it less often but it does a lot of damage, then it will feel good. But honestly, it's impossible to tell what they're actually going for because they're Blizzard, you know. To be fair, it just seems very annoying to have to refresh Flame Shock more often. This change feels more like a change just for change. I don't really see the point. I don't really mind changing the tick duration to 3 seconds instead of 2 seconds if their goal is to make Lava Burst feel more powerful, but I don't see why they would reduce the duration of the Flame Shock itself. Now that we got this out of the way, let's take a look at the towns we have. The towns are pretty much, a lot of them are the same. Like if you look at the last row, Unlimited Power, Stormkeeper Ascendance, it's the exact same, level 45, exact same, 40, exact same, 35, exact same, 30, exact same, but then on level, on 25, Aftershock is a bit different now. It now gives your Earthshock a 25% chance not to consume any stacks of Fulmination, which would be nice if Earthshock would actually do some goddamn damage, because if I do a Lightning Bolt here... Okay, that was a lot of different things critting, but... Goddamn, with all this gear on, okay, it was, what, 500 damage? And I have, what, 7 stacks of Fulmination now? If that would have been a non-crit, it would have been like 800 damage or something. It doesn't feel much more powerful than a lightning bolt, you know? Like, I feel like you want Earthshock to feel like you're building up to something and then bam, you just do a massive hit. But right now, it feels like there's just no point. Like Earthshock just, well, besides the balancing issue that Earthquake is better, Earthshock feels like it has no impact. So, 25% chance to not consume any stacks of Fulmination, which... This would be really cool, but it would be only really cool if Earthshock actually was valuable and if they balance it first. Then the new one is Echoing Shock, which is really cool. It makes it so when it's an ability that you get every 30 seconds. When you shock a target, you cast the same spell again 1 second later for free. Now, the interesting thing about this is, I've done some testing. When you do a Lightning Bolt, it will cast a Lightning Bolt again. When you do Stormkeeper Lightning Bolt, it will cast a Lightning Bolt again, but it will have the increased damage from Stormkeeper. Now the interesting thing is, when you try to do this on the second... Actually, let me show you. I'll cut the video so that I can show it back to back. But anyway, let's see. I do Stormkeeper. I do Echoing Shock. Now I do Lightning Bolt. You see, it did a ton of damage. And now let's wait for 1 minute until it's back. Okay, so Stormkeeper is coming back in 5 seconds. This time what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna Stormkeeper. I'm gonna use 1 Lightning Bolt, then I'm gonna Echoing Shock, and I'm gonna use the second stack of Stormkeeper, and then we'll take a look at the damage. So, Stormkeeper, Lightning Bolt, the Shock. Now, if I do Lightning Bolt again, high damage, and then low damage. Now, the reason for this, which I think is not a very good reason, is that when it duplicates the spell, it will use whatever buffs you have active. So, after you cast Echoing Shock and then you do the Lightning Bolt, because you still have 1 stack of Stormkeeper left, it looks at your buffs and it's like, oh, I should buff the next Lightning Bolt by a lot. But it doesn't consume the stack, which is, honestly, I'm not a big fan. Like, you can think, oh, you can play around this, you can like have some cool moments where you just buff something up. But I think it would be way cooler if it would save, if you could build up a very strong ability, like a Lightning Bolt for example, and then when it casts it again, that it casts it with whatever buffs you had active at the time. The reason I think that would be cooler is because you would get more rewarding gameplay if, for example, you would play with Surge of Power, for example. Like if I do Surge of Power, okay, I need to make sure I don't fuck this up. Let's see, it was, okay, 6 stacks of Fulmination. Let me just consume 6 stacks of Fulmination real quick. 5, 6, okay, and then, oh, that's more than 6 stacks, but whatever. So I use Earthshock. So now I have this for 13 seconds. My next spell will be enhanced. So now I do this. And now if I do my Lightning Bolt, I should get 1 to 3 extra elemental overloads. The second time it cast it with Echoing Shock, it didn't have the buff from Surge of Power. Because I didn't have it anymore, because I consumed it on the first cast of my Lightning Bolt. Now imagine if it would actually copy this Surge of Power. Then every so often... Like, look how much damage that... actually, Yeah, I think it reset. Like, look how much damage that did. That was... What, I used one Stormkeeper charge? Let's try it again. So let's see how much damage we can do with one spellcast of Stormkeeper together with Surge of Power together with Echoing Shock. This will only be consuming one of the stacks of Stormkeeper, so keep that in mind. I'm not going to consume two because I want to display how much damage you could do with one hit. And then you need to think how much more damage you would be doing if Surge of Power was also copied on the second cast of Echoing Shock. So let's make sure this doesn't fall off. So I cast my Earth Shock to get the Surge of Power. Now let's wait for this to reset. It should reset soon. Okay, so now Echoing Shock. And now one Lightning Bolt. Look how much damage that did. That was 9k damage in one hit. I don't even think I crit. I didn't crit a single time. That's an insane amount of damage. And now imagine if on the second cast of my Lightning Bolt with my Stormkeeper, it would do the effect again and it would get 1 to 3 extra overloads. I could do like 10k damage. Oh well, I'm nearly at 10k already. I could do like 11k damage without getting any crits. 11 to 12k. That's insane. Like, how cool would that be? So I hope that they will change how Echoing Shock works to copy whatever buffs you had active so that we can play around it. Instead of having this situation where it's, oh, you need to use it at the first Lightning Bolt of a Stormkeeper, otherwise Echoing Shock is kind of shit. You know what I mean? Also, Echoing Shock, it sounds cool in theory if things like Earth Shock would do a lot of damage. Like, imagine if Earth Shock would do like 3k damage or something baseline. Imagine copying that Earth Shock again. That would be really fucking cool. Because let me show you another last final example that I'm gonna do for Echoing Shock. Because I really think Echoing Shock sounds like a cool ability, but right now it is not. So let's wait until this cooldown is back. The same thing I said before, where it doesn't copy the things you have active, it only uses whatever you have active at the time it casts the ability again. So imagine you would have a very powerful Earth Shock, and you would be able to copy that with Echoing Shock. You would think by default, oh, Echoing Shock sounds cool, I can do 2 Earth Shocks. But let me cast Echoing Shock. I do the first Earth Shock. It does big hit. And then it casts it again. And the second time it cast it, let's see, Fulmination only hits once. Which means that for the second Earth Shock, it didn't even use Fulmination. Like, what is the point of this ability right now? I'm sincerely hoping that this is a bug. Because if it's not a bug, then it's just a complete waste of a very cool or potentially cool ability. Then, Elemental Blast, still the same stuff as before, except that there's a change now. Like, as you can see, Elemental Blast will consume all stacks of Fulmination to deal extra nature damage to your target. I think that's kind of cool. It's basically getting another hard hitter. Let's see how much damage it actually does. Let's put it on this. Let's get to 8 stacks and then cast it, see how much damage it does. Because right now it's pretty impossible to tell how much damage something will do with the current tooltip. Okay, let's see. Well, that was disappointing. Okay, that was very disappointing. Okay, I'm hoping it's not implemented yet. Also, if you're wondering, I don't have Azerite equipped because if I would, then I would be doing a lot more damage with Lava Burst, which would not be intended. Now, the first row, there's also a change. Alternate, still the same. Echo of the Elements, still the same, still really good. Then they added a new talent called Static Discharge, which at first when they added it, I thought it was going to be for enhancement because it sounds like something for enhancement. But apparently it's something for elemental. And you would think, oh, you would be hitting all the enemies that, you know, you're in combat with for some damage, but it only hits one enemy. And as you can see, 43 nature damage every 0.5 seconds for 3 seconds. That is nothing. Now, the reason for this is that when I talked to Kena, apparently Static Discharge is scaling with attack power right now, which is very funny because initially I thought it was for enhancement. So because it scales with attack power, we don't really get much damage from it. So we still have to see how much damage we're going to be doing with it if we get it to scale with spell power. Now let's take a look at the Covenant abilities. So the first one is the Kyrian Covenant, which gives us Vesper Totem, which it's nice. It's basically when you place it down, the next 3 attacks you do will make the totem explode, or next 3 spellcasts will make the totem explode to up to 6 enemies in its radius for some damage. Also, when you cast a heal, it will do the same for healing, the 3 stacks for damage and healing are completely separate from each other, so you don't have to worry that if you heal, it would consume a stack. So basically, numbers wise, it looks decent. It looks like the best one so far. Right now, Kyrian is most likely the best one. If you want to check out more info about Kyrian Covenant, I made another video about it, and there I explain everything in more detail. Now the second one is the Night Fae. They get Fae Transfusion, which I think it's a very cool ability. Basically, it's a 3-second channel, which it reduces with haste and stuff, so it doesn't actually take 3 seconds. But it's a 3-second channel that does damage to up to 4 enemies, and you can use it every 2 minutes. I think it's a very cool ability because once you press it again, 25% of the damage you did will be done as healing to 8 people, and pretty much you can heal 8 people to full if you were attacking 4 enemies, and you can do that pretty much instant. So I think it's a cool ability. Then there's also Soul Shape, which some people might think it's useless because we have Ghost Wolf, but because you instantly blink when you activate Soul Shape, I think it's actually a cool ability which can be useful in multiple situations. And also, you instantly go at 50% movement speed instead of going at 50% movement speed once you're running around in Ghost Wolf for 4 seconds. Of course, Ghost Wolf still has the benefit of not being able to go below base movement speed, but that's situation to situation dependent. In any way, if you want to check out more info about this covenant, I made a video about it as well on my channel, so you can just check that one out. Now, the next one is the Ventir Covenant. It has the Chain Harvest ability. It's like a Chain Heal and a Chain Lightning combined, and you have to choose if you want to use it on healing or damage. And the damage is absolute trash right now, so I don't know what they're gonna do to this, but it's not worth to cast. Even if you go that covenant, it's not even worth to cast it because Chain Lightning does, from what I know, it does more damage than Chain Harvest, and it also doesn't interact with Mastery or anything like that. Now, I haven't checked if it works with Echoing Shock, but does it really matter if the ability does less damage than our Chain Lightning? I don't really think so. Then we also have the Teleport spell, which is called Door of Shadows, which can be useful in some situations. So that's the nice part about it, but at the moment the Ventir Covenant is completely useless, and if they don't change anything, which I think they will, then no one is ever going to use this. Then the last one is the Necrolord Covenant. If you see my enhancement video, for enhancement this is super useless. For elemental, however, this can be decent because Lava Burst still does a fair amount of damage. So if you manage to get Flame Shock, which is now 18 seconds sadly, if you get it up on like 4 targets, you can do a Lava Burst on 4 targets every 45 seconds, which I don't know the exact numbers, I would have to check. But for elemental, it actually sounds like a decent ability. But if you do go for this Covenant ability on AoE, then you're pretty much not going to go Ice Fury. But the good thing about Elemental Shaman is that you're probably not going to go Ice Fury on AoE anyway, while for Enhancement Shaman right now, you're pretty much always going with the Frost Shock talent. So that's why for Elemental, Necrolord is way better than it is for Enhancement, but we'll have to see how it plays out with the final numbers. Now, I'm not going to go over the legendaries because they might change completely, and it's one of those things that I will probably go over once the numbers are more final, because right now there's really, since they recently changed how the Earthquake and Earthshock stuff works with Fulmination, there's a chance that they might change some legendaries, just like how they have to change some for Shadow. Anyway, I know I've been kind of rambling about all kinds of different stuff about Elemental Shaman, but this is basically my initial thoughts. I'm trying to talk about whatever I can think of that I have on my mind for Elemental Shaman. So if you want to see a more structured video on Elemental Shaman, or where I go into specifics of what talents you should choose, how the rotation works on single target, how the rotation works on AoE, then I will be putting out a guide just before the pre-patch most likely. And if not before the pre-patch because it's not worth it, then I will definitely put out the guide before Shadowlands releases or when Shadowlands releases. Anyway, that was all from me, so thanks for watching and I hope to see you next time.